Welcome to Better at Work. On this episode, I am so excited to be joined by the wonderful Carlii Lyon. Now, Carlii is someone I've actually known for many years and someone I learned a lot from. Actually, I think this podcast mightn't even exist if it wasn't for Carlii. So I'm super excited to have her here with us. Now, Carlii is a former international personal publicist turned executive coach and speaker with over 2 decades of experience shaping the personal brands of incredible individuals globally. She empowers leaders and teams to build and create impact. She is the author of a brand new book, Courage to Be: Small Steps for a Big Life. A really brilliant practical guide to stop playing small, start thinking big, and shape a personal brand that attracts the opportunities you deserve. So I'm super excited. Carlii is joining us from Sydney. Hello, Carlii. Welcome to Better at Work.
Oh, thank you so much, Cathal. I'm so excited to be here as well.
Super excited to have you on. Now, you know, because Carlii's listened to the show, we'll tell them all a little bit about how you and I met in a second. But let's start like we always do with where did it all start for you? What happened in early life or along the way that drove people, or I suppose drove you to have this interest in helping people create amazing personal brands?
I'll start when I first launched my own PR consultancy at the young age of 21. I was very keen, maybe a little naive, and thought while I was studying PR at college, I thought I can probably do even better than what my professors are talking about. So I built my business while I was still studying. And that led to me traveling all over the world, representing high profile individuals, and always specializing, not really by design, but even in some ways accidentally, always specializing in individual branding. So it was a supermodel, authors, speakers, experts. So I was their personal publicist and I was there to shape, manage, and elevate their personal brand. So I did that for well over a decade, close to 15 years. And then I went on extended maternity leave. And I think how this is where it probably gets really relevant to why I'm doing the work that I'm doing in terms of your question, because it was on extended maternity leave that I was confronted with the very harsh reality that here I was out in the world building personal brands, but I didn't and had never thought about my own personal brand. And I'm sure for anyone who's listening, whether they've stepped out of work for health reasons, whether it was parental leave or
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, they know that feeling of, oh my God, I'm out of the loop. And actually, I've never done anything to make myself visible, to build my profile. And that was when I thought, okay, if I hadn't done anything and I was someone who's living and breathing it,
It's your
and
job, yeah.
it's my job,
Yeah.
but I wasn't applying any of it to
For it
myself.
yourself, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I can't. I think because we have so many listeners who do hit that wall of like, okay, I've
Mm.
been looking after children for 10 years. I don't know where to begin. So I can imagine you hitting that yourself. But I suppose it's lovely for us and me to hear that even someone who like yourself who's got the experience of helping supermodels or whoever it is to create the brand, that
Mm.
even you were like, I don't know where to begin, or that's amazing that you were so honest
Yeah.
about that and shared it with people.
Well, I don't even know if it was a matter of I didn't know where to begin. I think I was just too afraid to even go there.
Mm,
And while I was on maternity leave, I actually remembered a a moment in my career where I was approached by a magazine, and it was a women's magazine, and they wanted to feature me as a young woman in business representing all of these amazing clients. And I remember when they reached out to me, I called one of my clients and I said, this magazine, they want to do an interview with me. What do you think? Should I do it? Do you mind if I do it? Which is ridiculous. And really what that was, and I could only see then in hindsight, was I was desperate for validation. I was desperate for permission. I needed someone to say to me, Carlii, you're great at what you're doing. Put yourself out there, build your profile, let people know who you are and what you're doing. And I think that is where a lot of people get stuck, is that
I so
waiting.
agree.
Is that
I so
waiting?
agree. It's interesting. We had Helen Topper on the podcast. She's got this amazing brand called Squiggly Careers, helps lots of people with, with their careers and where they want to be. And she talks about a lot that people have these confidence gremlins, and it's about
Mm,
like really how do you close them down. And I do have a question for you on confidence as well, because you bring that up in the book. But maybe before we go into the book, let's maybe tell our listeners a little bit about how we met all those years ago,
yes.
because it's a long time ago now. Well, I mean, it's probably about, must be 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was in a period of my own life where I felt I want to do something different. You probably remember I was, had
Mm-hmm.
been working in the world of banking for a long time. I was still in the world of banking, I think, when we met. And I was like, I want to do something different. I want to create a personal brand that's different, because I felt I was a little different to some of my peers and colleagues, but I was also anxious about being too different or putting something out there. I was like very, very anxious. And then I can't even remember who told me about you. I must have, I don't know who it was, but um, when I was sent your details, I was like, oh, okay, this could be an interesting lady to chat with, because she's got a
Mm,
very different perspective on personal brand than maybe the kind of people I would have previously spoken to.
mm-hmm.
And you really did have a very different perspective on personal brand. And just maybe maybe we'll tell the listeners a little bit about when you met me. And also,
Mm,
I'd love you to just link it to your perspective on personal brand, because it is very different. It's not about, I think it's not about like, well, hey, this is who you are. This is why, there's a little bit about how can you serve people as well, right?
yeah,
But maybe we'll start
definitely.
there.
So my memory of it is that I believe you listened to Catherine Mahoney's
Oh,
podcast.
that's it. Yes, Catherine.
Yes.
That is
And I remember
it.
that because Kath, this
You're
is a friend
right.
of mine. And I remember calling her and saying, I just got an inquiry from this guy. He sounds so interesting. He listened to the podcast. And so we had a bit of a moment. We were like,
Oh
oh,
my
that's,
God.
because
Yes.
as I'm sure you
Hello,
know,
Catherine, if you're listening. We got to tell her to
yeah,
listen.
I'm going to tell her to listen now. But it's always nice when you're putting things out in the world to know that it's reaching people and it's having an impact. So
Yes,
we were
absolutely.
having a moment. So I remember you reached out, and yes, I absolutely remember that you had some hesitation in putting yourself out there, and there was some concern. You had worked with these iconic and not necessarily conservative brands, but in a lot of ways very corporate brands. And you do have this
Absolutely.
vivacious, fun, outgoing personality. And so there was that concern and worry. But when it comes to what's my perspective on personal brand, there's a few things that perhaps they are different in some ways. Firstly, I'm such a big believer that when you show up in a way that feels true to you, that you're proud to put out there, you can only attract the right people, places, and opportunities. When you're brave enough to really let people see you, and then you tap into visibility in such a true, honest, and powerful way. But then secondly, to your point, I really do genuinely believe that showing up and with a clear intention, not just for attention, but showing up because you do want to add value, you do want to serve people. And that's what you're doing with this
Absolutely.
podcast. Like, undoubtedly, yes, you're getting the benefit of visibility. Yes, I'm sure that it's attracted amazing opportunities. But ultimately, you can feel in the soul of the brand and everything that you do and how you show up that you are doing this because you genuinely want to help people be better at work and enjoy work. So
Oh my
imagine
God,
if the world didn't
absolutely.
have that.
Well, it's interesting you say that because someone asked me the other day. I was in London and someone said to me, "What's your vision?" And I said, "Look, it's still the same. I really just like helping people. I can't help it."
Mm.
My, Cathal often says to me, God, if you could make money out of just helping people and connecting people, you'd be a millionaire. And I do
Yeah.
like to just help people. And it's interesting. I had a message from a lady the other day who listened to last week's podcast, which is all about mattering and how
Mm.
um, basically this guy Zach Mercurio, who's written this brilliant book about how important it is to matter to other people, and like
Mm.
that in the workplace, he said that around 39% of people said that no one in the organization knew their unique talent, which was so interesting. And I had this message from a lady who said that episode, she was crying. She left me a voice note on LinkedIn and said, "I'm sorry to be upset here, but I am so listening to this and I feel like Zach and you are talking to me," because she said, "I feel
Mm.
like I haven't mattered in work for so long." So to
Oh.
your point, like I just love, it's not that I want that poor lady to be crying, but the fact
No,
that
of course.
she felt like she was being listened to and she got something from it, and she said, "I'm going to buy the book. I'm going to take something, I know what I'm going to do next as off the back of it." So yeah, and that was like you.
It's
When I met you, you were great at, I think, because I was kind of putting myself down a bit, going, "Oh, I'm not sure I could do a podcast, for example." Like, and I
mm.
remember distinctly what you said to me at the time. I said, God, there's so many podcasts out there," and you said to me, "Well, what if everyone that was thinking of writing a book said there's so many books out there?" And it was such a good moment when you said that to me, because I was like, Jesus, that is such a good point.
Yeah. And I say that I do. I say that often because it's the truth. And I know for a fact that the people that are writing books, and I'm sure all of the amazing people you've had on the podcast, they've doubted themselves.
Oh,
They've
God.
questioned their ability to do the things that they're doing and to put it out in the world. It's not that they're not having that hesitation and they're not having that fear. It's just that they're doing it anyway.
Exactly, exactly, and we're going to talk about that as we go down, because there's a few bits in the book that you talk to this on. I'm like, oh my God, that is so true. But let's go into the book now a little
Yeah.
bit, because I had a great time listening to you. I was telling Carly before we started recording, I was listening to the final bits of the book last night while just getting ready for my shower, and she was loudly being talking to me
I love
at
it.
11 o'clock last night. But you open the book, and let's remind our listeners of the book's title, Courage to Be. And you
Hmm.
open the book referencing a article you wrote that went viral. The article's title
Yes.
was Be Aware of the Three Thoughts on the Path to Putting Yourself Out There. Now, you say that this viral moment happened because many people struggle to find the courage to be who they want to be and put themselves out there. So let's
Yeah.
start there. Why do you think so many of us, including myself, often struggle to put ourselves out there?
To be very honest with you, I think I'm still trying to answer that question. But when it comes to the three thoughts, so and why the article went so viral is I started to realize through my coaching, I could see a pattern. And this was really before I had started to put myself out there consistently. So I could see a pattern in these coaching clients, and they were all saying the same thing. They were all having these three thoughts. And the irony was they were the same three thoughts that were holding me back from putting myself out there, which is often the case. You teach what you need to learn. And also, the people that you are helping usually are the greatest teachers for you.
Yeah.
And so I started to think, okay, these thoughts are not personal, they are universal. And they seem to be some form of resistance in the universe that just exists to challenge people maybe. But the three thoughts are: who am I to speak? I'm not saying anything new, so why would anyone care? and everyone will think I have a big ego. And I have worked now, so that was in 2019. It's been nearly 7 years that I've been out in the world doing this, coaching, working with teams. And I can tell you that it doesn't matter what level of the organization that an individual is at, whether they're starting their career or if they're at the top of the chain and they're well established, we all have these three thoughts in varying degrees when it comes to putting ourselves out there. And I was talking about it with someone today in another interview, and we agreed that maybe it exists in the universe so that we don't all turn into egomaniacs and, start acting like gods. Like, it keeps us humble and it keeps us just, at bay. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know why so many of us are, but what a lot of people will talk about from a theory perspective is that we are social creatures and we
Yeah.
don't want to be ostracized. And that is, I think a lot of it is at the heart of that, is just that fear of being rejected.
I loved it. I thought it was a really smart way to open the book because it hit you straight away with, we're all a
Mm,
little bit anxious to put ourselves out there. And then as I went through the book, I was interested how you broke the book into three parts, into this
mm-hmm.
mind, body, brand piece. And
Yeah.
I think because my brain kind of works on building blocks. And I know when you and I worked together, you were very good at that, kind of like going, let's start here, let's move to here, and then we will get to the end goal. Because I think first when I started working with you, I was like going, okay, wait now, I'm expecting like a beautiful new brand on my LinkedIn. But actually, there was a bit of a process. And I'm assuming
Yes.
that's why you've broken the book into that mind, body, brand. But would you mind just telling our listeners a little bit about why you started with the mind, the body, and then the brand?
I think a big part of where that came from is my own love and passion in the world of wellness and this idea of mind, body, soul. And that to live a truly purpose led, heart filled life, you need to consider and be in alignment with your mind, body, and soul. But when I started to think about my work and the impact that it can have on an individual when they really do start to have the courage to show up and be seen and bravely put themselves out there, there's something so powerful and magical that happens when my book coach calls it the enchanted slipstream, where you just like, there's
Love
something
that.
that is magic when you get into that zone. So instead of mind, body, soul, I thought, well, mind, body, brand is a beautiful trinity. And when I think about and thought about what it was that I was working with clients on as they started to think about their brand, as they started to think about how they were showing up and influencing other people, I felt like they were the three core components that you do really need to consider. The mind is the stories that you tell yourself, your mindset. Body is starting to recognize and appreciate that your body is this beautiful vehicle that you can use, and it can be a wonderful partner in you creating the life that you want and showing up the way that you want to show up. And then your brand is about communicating and letting people know who you are, what you stand for, and why it matters. And I think that that piece around brand, it comes back to the idea that if nobody knows who you are and nobody knows what you do and nobody knows why it matters, then how do you attract the opportunities that are right for you? How do you attract the relationships that are right for you? Nobody wins when you hide from the world. So everybody wins when you do show up and you do it in your own way. I'm not, Cathal, out in the world trying to create, or am I under any illusion that everyone will want to be world famous and create huge brands? for some people, showing up and being visible and creating the life they want is just being visible to their team in their company
Yes. Yes.
or their community or their industry. It will be different for every person.
I agree. I agree. It's so interesting you said that as well about what what are you trying to create? I mean, I love creating a bit of a community, and it doesn't need to be a
Mm.
massive community, but an engaged community who get a lot from the show. And I mentioned before we started recording Aisha Basel to you, who I love Aisha as well. And she said, it's just, you said something there, Kylie, that reminded me what she said. When she does a presentation or a talk, she's often
Mm.
on stage, she opens by saying, "Hello, everybody. Welcome to this friendship factory." And everyone's looking, going, and she goes, and the reason I say that is we're sharing the same space, time, and
Mm.
interest. So often you're going to have potential friends around you because you're sharing a space, time, and interest, which is so beautiful,
I
right? And
love that.
actually, and it's so true. And I have found that
Yeah.
through doing this podcast, right? I have made friends with some of the guests because we have the same interests, or
Yep.
and that's like, to your point, right? If I hadn't created the personal brand, I would have missed out on all of these people who have a similar interest to me. I don't get
Yes.
anything like, what we get out of it is we meet up for coffee or lunch, and we go, "Oh my God, did you see that new research on Blan?" We're like, "Oh yeah, we could do a
Yeah.
little episode together on that." It's like it creates more and more, and yeah, and
Yep.
that's why I just love where the way you think about personal brand is that it's more than just putting out a fancy picture of yourself and
Yes.
a some airbrushing. It's like it's so much deeper. It is the mind, the body, the soul, not the soul, but the kind of the soul
Yeah.
of what you're trying to put out there, right? Like really getting to the essence of that. And I remember when you and I worked together, you were really keen on going, how what are you selling, or what are you wanting to put out there, and really thinking about the words you use and everything. I love that, and we'll come back to that in a second. Now let me one thing I really love in the book as well is all the beautiful
Mm.
stories you have in there. I mean, there were so many stories from your own
Mm.
career to being told to always wear red lipstick, which I see you've got the red lipstick on today, and
Yes.
even your mother's adventures later in life. And I think what I took from this, now you tell me if I'm wrong here, I feel that you take a lot from people's stories and you love to hear other people's stories. Do
Hmm.
you think, is that what makes you so good at personal branding, is that you've got this listening ear and you love hearing people's stories? And then, I mean, I could be wrong here, but that was just as I was reading the book.
I think you are so right. And do you know what's so crazy is, you know how you have core memories and
Yeah.
sometimes they're so strange and they're so out of nowhere. I have this core memory. Someone asked me about this, I don't know, months ago. But I have this core memory. Oh, they asked me about, what were you good at when you were younger? And I remember writing a list. Maybe I was 11 years old. And one of the things that I put on the list that I was really good at was listening to people. So, to your
Wow.
point, I genuinely love hearing people's stories. And because I am a naturally a deep thinker,
Mm-hmm.
for me, and it drives my husband crazy because he's just like it means nothing. I didn't mean anything by what I said or what I did, or but for me, I think very deeply about everything. And in so many ways, what we do, the choices we make, the colors we use in our brand, the things that we do, the rooms that we want to be in, the people we want to associate with, the companies that we choose to work for, all of this paints a picture. It all tells a story. And I love that you can use this vehicle that we call personal brand to broadcast and to tell people that story. And I just think that there's too many people that don't pay enough attention or don't think they're important enough for it to matter. And that makes me upset because I think, yeah, it starts with you really believing that you matter, your story matters, and that by showing up, you will add value, whether it's to one person, whether it's to a million people. But being intentional and being honest with who you are and what you stand for can only lead to good things.
I love that. And it kind of links to what you were saying in chapter 4 of the book, because I think I loved how you said, speak back to the little you.
Yeah.
And you had that opening quote of in that chapter of words have the power to harm us, especially when they come from the voice in our own heads. And I know this little voice myself, very well. And I've had it, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have, listening today have also had it. So what do you say to your clients when they have that little voice in their head going, you can't do this, no one like to your point, right? What you just said, right? You've got something that someone does want to hear, right? Even if it's one person, you've got a unique experience. How do you go about, like, someone that you meet? Because I'm sure you meet some people, you go, geez, I meet some people, Carly, and I go, Christ, if I had your experience and your
Yes.
insights, I would be a nightmare. I'd be so arrogant. I'd be like, please. I say it all the time. I would be just like, I would be impossible, But how do you go about it with people where they have that little voice going, no?
Look, I think that there are so many different varieties of that little voice. And the reality is, what I would end up prescribing to each individual is going to be different. But let's say generally, first and foremost, I say speak back to that little voice. That little voice usually comes from someone in the past.
Yes.
When I speak to people and they say that I'm afraid of putting myself out there, or they're worried about what other people will think, and that little voice is saying, oh, people are going to think, who do they think they are?
Yes.
And I always ask them the question, who's everyone?
Yeah.
Like, who is everyone? Because you're telling me that everyone's going to think this, everyone's going to say that. Who is everyone? And usually it's a childhood friend.
Yes.
It's an old manager. It's a disgruntled peer. So that little voice has also been influenced by usually one or two people in the past. So
I so agree.
Recognizing it's there, but just learning to speak back to it. And I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Dr. Carol Dweck, mindset.
Love her.
She talks about giving that voice a little name and starting to recognize the tone of that voice, what that voice says to you on a regular basis, and just talking back to it.
I did that because my grandmother, no longer with us, but she was quite critical, and her name was Maggie, and I do call my little voice Maggie, and we do like I do go, hey Maggie, get back in there now, Maggie, get out. I start shouting. I go, Maggie, no, not today, Maggie, not today. No.
I love that. But you know what? I remember one of my clients, she gave her little voice the name of her sister-in-law.
Oh.
And then what happened was at Christmas, she just found herself so angry at her sister-in-law the whole time because she'd made that association. So bless your grandma. She's not here.
She's not here. We can use Maggie because I love this whole concept of giving the little voice the name. I think it's great, and and I just think it's so useful for people to think that you've got to move past that little voice and just keep going, and because what I loved is that you had this section, in the book where you talked about confidence is a consequence of action, not your
Yes.
qualifications, right? Because I was
Yes.
thinking, okay, you'll have that little voice and go, why does anyone want to hear what I've got to say? Oh, maybe if I go and get lots of extra qualifications, then they'll want to hear. And it's almost
Mm.
like, it's we had Caroline Webb on the podcast many years ago, and she said it's like this when then. It's like when I have got this then, and she talks about this when then. And what you're
Yeah.
saying is actually just go for it. It's actually about action. And when I saw that in the book, it reminded me of, we had Ian Robertson on the podcast, and he wrote a brilliant book, How Confidence Works. And
Yeah.
he said that confidence is a set of habits that feel fake at first, but become real with practice. And I thought that's kind of similar to what Carly is saying.
Well, this is where courage has come into the title. It's at the heart of what the book is all about. Because when you think about what courage represents, I call courage the introverted sidekick to confidence. Because as you said,
Wow.
you can't feel confident unless you've taken confident action first. And that comes from the work of Dr. Russ Harris, who wrote The Confidence Gap. And he says that the feelings of confidence only come after taking confident action. So if we can't feel the confidence until we've taken confident action, what do we need to do? We need something to bridge that gap. And that's really what courage is all about. And someone said it to me the other day that courage, when you think about it, it really is a quality where faking it till you make it is at the heart of what courage is about. Because of course you don't necessarily know what you're doing. Of course you're afraid to do it, but courage is all about doing it anyway. And I think that can be really frustrating for people to hear. But I am a result of just taking action. Like, I was that person who was terrified. I was that person who, thought she was going to throw up the first time she posted on social media. I was that person who, stood in front of an audience for the first time and was shaking and, had sweat pouring down the sides of my body. I really, I was that person who went on TV and cried before the interview and then straight after the interview. So I really know and believe, and I've experienced and I've seen it in my clients, the only way that you can get through it is through it. There's no other choice.
I love that. I love that. And I saw that in the book as well. I thought, God, I can't believe that Carly was crying before interviews and stuff.
Yes.
It's funny because recently someone rang me in Ireland, and I thought, God, I wish I'd read Carly's book before I said no to this, but
Mm.
I didn't. Well, I'll tell you what it was. A lovely girl, Neve, who I knew in Sydney. She works in media, and she's moved back to Ireland, and she's working for a Irish kind of media company there. And she rang me up
Mm.
and she said, "Hey, we would love to get you on the 1 o'clock show or something they were talking about work stuff." And she said, I would love you to come on and talk about like HR role in blah blah blah. And I thought, oh my God, I was sweating. I was like, oh no, no, no. I said, I don't think I'm the right person for this because I'm not an HR expert. So I started, and I literally was like, I can't do it.
No, you should have called me.
Oh my
Don't ever
God.
say no to anything before calling me, because and that's why I shared that
Yeah.
story, because I want people to realize that those feelings of not being ready, of being
Yes.
completely terrified, are not a sign that you shouldn't do something.
Yeah.
They're just a sign that you're stretching and you're out of your comfort zone and you're in the unknown, but you have to do it
I
because
know. I
you
should have
have
done
to
it.
go through the first.
I'm looking at just as you were talking there, I was looking at the WhatsApps on it, and it was the lovely Neve Dunn. So thank you, Neve, for reaching out and not forgetting me. And it was like, fathers in higher paid jobs are more likely to avail of paternity leave. That was the kind of story. And I was like, oh God, I don't know. Like, I felt I could comment on it and I would have enough, but I was like, I had that little, Maggie was back, and Maggie was there like on the shoulder. She was
Maggie
like,
was
Maggie was like,
She was
nah,
right there.
listen.
She had you in a headlock.
Yeah, she was like, nah, listen to me now. What do you know about paternity leave policy? You know, and all this. I was like, oh God. I should have done it. I should have done it. So Neve Dunn, if you want me to go on Irish radio again, I next time, having read The Courage to Be by Carlii Lyon, I'm going to come on the show.
You are 100, and you've put it out there now, so you're so
Put it out there now. I've
accountable
got to
to
do it.
that. And you have to do
Exactly.
it because the first time is always going to be, and my first time on TV, live TV. So I get there, I'm in the studio, terrified already, and so it's live to air. I'm sitting there. The interviewer asked me the first question, and we had talked about what the questions were going to be. So I had prepared in my mind what I thought the first answer was going to be. And then she threw in a completely new question. And then what was worse was that when she then asked the question and left me to talk, she then looked away and did not give me any eye contact. And she was
Oh
looking
God.
at the producers and the cameraman. And I was thinking, oh my God, she's looking at them thinking, oh my God, we've got to wheel this girl off because she doesn't know what she's talking about. And I had this whole dialogue in my head. So my point is, you have to go through the first time.
Oh
And
my
your
God.
first time won't be like that, by the way. I shouldn't have even said that. But you have.
It'd probably be worse. Will you stop? It's funny. I was talking about it as well with someone yesterday because there's a lot of talk about work at the moment, and there's a lot of opportunities to go and talk about work. And I met another lovely girl who's actually works on a TV show here in the UK called This Morning, which is like the big kind of morning show, and I met with her and she was like, oh, you'd be great on television and, you could answer our, listeners' questions. I was like, oh my God. And then, she gave me really good advice. And this is why it's good for our listeners to hear that even people like me who's putting out content, etc. She actually said to me, she goes, I've looked at your podcast and everything. And she goes, I love what you're doing. But she said, you need to do more on you. And she said, you're hiding behind the guests. You're asking them questions and it's easy and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, I would love you to do more to camera yourself
Yeah,
so that you get more used to that. And I was like, oh my God, dreading that. But I've started to do it because I have to do it, right? And she was
you
like, oh,
do.
because, you could be on our show. And I was like, oh my God. And then I thought, do I really even want to do that? And so Maggie was back. She was back.
Maggie was,
She
that
was
was a
back.
Maggie, that was definitely a Maggie comment because I
Yes.
remember when we first started working together, I do remember you talking about not necessarily, it wasn't that you were saying, oh, I want to be on TV, but you said that there was a time where you saw yourself on a show
Yeah.
like Graham Norton.
Oh yeah, I love
So
Graham.
you put it out to the universe all the way back then. Now the universe is delivering and you're pushing it away.
Well, yeah, the universe is, and it's funny. It keeps happening, right? Another
Yes.
thing happened yesterday where someone in America listened to the show, and she goes, "You would be brilliant in America. Irish people or they love an Irish accent. Your content's brilliant." And this lady was like saying, she's in LA, and she goes, "Please, can we talk? We'd love to promote you in the US."
Oh my God,
And
that's
I'm like,
amazing.
so again, sweating again. Maggie was back going, oh no, this is so Maggie's just turning up the whole time at the moment.
We
And
need to give her a lollipop or something.
we need to, yeah,
do
we need to.
something with her.
But back to the book, right? Because like I did really love the brand section of the book. Like I ate that up. I loved it. And I loved you referenced this Japanese approach to purpose, which I thought was really smart because I do think people need to think about their purpose before they start building a brand. And a lot of
Yep.
times people don't stop and think about that. Tell us about this Japanese approach that you beautifully referenced in the book.
Yeah, it's called Ikigai and it loosely translates to your calling. So, your calling, your purpose. And they have this beautiful framework that is essentially 4 questions that you ask yourself and you look for the intersection of those 4 questions. And that perhaps will lead you to starting to find or get clearer on your purpose. And I always like to say, instead of trying to find your purpose, you should choose your purpose. And so with this Ikigai, it's about putting some things out on paper and looking at perhaps some of the different pieces of your life and then choosing what you want your purpose to be, and knowing that your purpose for this year might be different
Oh,
in
yes.
5 years' time,
Oh,
right?
yeah. I remember you saying that in the book, even that, your brand could change over the years because you're changing. You're not just some static thing that stays the same. Also, Maggie might get a
Absolutely.
bit louder over the years. You got to push her back in. But you know what I mean? And I loved that in the book. But this approach, I loved the four components of it, like the
Yes.
questions, like what am I good at? What do I
Mm-hmm.
love to do? What can I be paid for? What
Mm-hmm.
problem am I solving and for whom? Brilliant, brilliant.
Brilliant.
I hadn't heard of it until you
Ah,
in the book. I think it's great. What am I good at? What do I love to do? What can I be paid for? What problem am I solving and for whom? So smart. And what I love in the book
perfect.
is that you then, this is where your brain is very like mine. You like to kind of have those building blocks. You move to the four P's of personal branding once you've
Mm-hmm.
got that clarity on the purpose. So, what am I good
Yep.
at? What do I love? Blah, 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 blah. And then you move into the four P's of personal branding, which are
Yep.
promise, packaging, position, promotion. I think
Mm-hmm.
if we could spend a few minutes on this, right? Because I
Mm.
found this really interesting. Promise, packaging, position, promotion. Would you mind telling our listeners who I think a lot of our listeners, Carly, have never even thought about personal branding.
Mm.
They don't. I think this
Yep.
is a very important point.
Yeah, perfect. So anyone in marketing will be familiar with a version of the four Ps. And really what I was aiming to do was to have people borrow from the world of traditional brand marketing and apply that to them as individuals. Because as you said, a lot of people haven't thought about their personal brand, and perhaps their idea of what a personal brand is so open-ended that there's no concreteness to it. And my definition of a personal brand, so that it's really clear and it relates to the four Ps, is that it is the intentional way an individual presents and packages who they are and what they do for a purpose. And the problem is, if you were to Google personal branding, you'll come across a person who says, you have a personal brand whether you shape it or not. Don't let the world shape your personal brand.
Mm,
And that is a statement I disagree with entirely. And I wrote about this for Forbes. I said, to say a person has a personal brand, whether they shape it or not, is like saying a busy, no name street food vendor in the back streets of Bangkok, Thailand, is as much of a brand as McDonald's. And I'm not talking about reach and popularity. I'm talking about one is consistent, cohesive, recognizable, reliable. You know what you're going to get at every touch point. And they've
yeah.
thought about that. And that's what a brand is. So it's the intentional way an individual presents and packages themselves. So when you start to apply that thinking to the four Ps, your promise, let's use the example of a Rolex watch. Okay, to bring this to life. So a Rolex watch, what would its promise be?
Tell you the time and look good.
Yes, perfect. So time and status. So there, your promise is the thing that people can reliably expect from you all the time, what you stand for. And I would suggest that if someone is perhaps got a clear piece of paper and has put the four Ps in front of them, that your promise really can be summed up in a few words. The less, the better. So for me, my promise is personal branding, influence, and I'm a speaker. So really clear three things that I want to be known for. So once you've got that promise, you then go into packaging. Just like packaging a Rolex watch. If I gave you a Rolex watch in a dirty bag, what would you think?
I think it fell off that street vendor in Thailand,
Yeah,
wherever you said
exactly.
that's he's had that in behind the counter and he's just throwing that out
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. So we know that brands go to great lengths to make sure that their products are packaged in the perfect way, because it does change how they're perceived and how the customer experiences it. So your packaging is exactly the same. Like you mentioned today that you've come with your new jumper, which looks so beautiful,
Well, no,
very
just for the listeners,
elegant.
I got a new, what do they call it? Shirt jackets? What do you call it? schnacket. I don't know what you call it.
Snack it.
Yes, not a snack. But I was like going, oh, I got to wear this now today. It's brand new for Carly because she's the personal branding expert. So I better package myself
So
well
good.
here today.
You're so well packaged right now.
Oh, please.
So
Can't
that's
make a
part of
silk
your
purse out of a
packaging.
sow's ear, Carly. Look, let's be honest, but we're trying our best here.
I love it. I love it. And I promise it looks amazing. So that's part of your packaging. But also, if I were to go onto your LinkedIn,
Yes.
any touch point, even today when I came into your studio, and we're obviously on separate continents, but your studio is beautifully branded. So that's all intentional. So that's your packaging. How are you showing up? And are you communicating your promise through what you say, what you signal, and what you showcase? And then your positioning is starting to think about, so let's use the Rolex example again. If you saw a Rolex in the toothpaste section of your local supermarket, what would you think?
I would think someone's stolen this and thrown it in here. No, I would think, God, this is like really the wrong place to be seeing this. Like, I want to be in this beautiful showroom. Like, in some ways, you see
Exactly.
those big queues on the streets in Sydney, outside the Cartier
It's
or wherever it is.
crazy.
It's like, oh, I got a queue for this thing. Like, I don't,
I
like a
know. That is
Rolex, like, I
crazy, by
shouldn't be
the way.
pick. That's what?
That's crazy
Oh, I
that
know it's
that's what's happening with
crazy, but I
luxury
think they
goods.
deliberately do it. We were talking
Yeah.
about this. I was talking about it with someone in London as well the other day about how certain restaurants they deliberately create the
Mm,
kind of queue outside, or so that it looks like it's super popular. But like, to your
yeah.
point about the Rolex in the toothpaste aisle, I'm like, going, nah, like that's too. It's not exclusive enough. If everyone can
Yep.
get it in the toothpaste aisle, then I'm like going, this ain't worth it. So
Exactly.
that's the position
And
is wrong.
the position is wrong, and Rolex also makes sure that its product is on the right people as well, the right ambassadors, so they're really clear about where they position their product. The same thing or the same mindset can be applied to you, where you position yourself. For example, the guests that you have on this show, that's a positioning statement. The platforms that you show up on, that's a positioning statement. Perhaps the articles or the content that you put out there on social media, that's part of your positioning. But it's being intentional about
Yeah.
how you're positioning yourself and really recognizing that opportunity begets opportunity. So if you take an opportunity that perhaps isn't how you want to be positioned, there's a really good chance, and I've heard this a lot with the executives that I work with, that their career has happened accidentally because they've taken one opportunity and that
Yeah.
turned into another, but all down the wrong path.
Yeah.
So that positioning piece is really good,
That
important.
happens a lot, that happens a lot. I think it's interesting you said about positioning as well, in terms of, sometimes when people come to me and they show me their CV and
Mm,
they have listed every single thing they've done over the last 20 years. And I remember Jenny Blake saying a few years ago, your CV shouldn't be a list of things you no longer want to do.
exactly.
You
And
know,
that's exactly,
it should be,
that's part
what
of your
is it that,
positioning.
yeah, it should be,
Yeah.
what do you want to be doing? What do you want to be known for?
Yeah. And I come to this conversation as a publicist. And as a publicist, what we're famous for is being able to spin a story whatever way we want it to be spun. That's why PR people were called spin doctors, because we were able to spin a story in whatever way. And the reality is that I could take someone's experience and show them how to spin it in a way that it probably doesn't even sound like what it sounded like before. It's just different words and different areas of focus. But that's what you need to do. Absolutely. To Jenny's point, is you want to be positioning yourself in a way that is signaling and showcasing and saying all the things that you want, not
Yes.
necessarily just all the things
But
you've
do you
done.
think people do it because they go, I got to show everything so that I look like maybe back to your point about getting all these qualifications? It's like, oh, I better show
Mm,
everything because then that backs up that I am, amazing, when
yeah.
actually it's kind of, I read some people's CVs, I'm like, oh my God, I'm bored. Like, what is all this stuff?
And that's the point. And that is a really important idea, is that if you give someone too much information, I mean, that's a communication rule. keep it on point.
Yeah.
Give them what you want them to remember and keep it simple, because
Yeah.
then it will be memorable. If you just overload them with stuff, exactly what will happen is what you've just described. None of
Well,
it will sink in.
I agree. And it's interesting, even with the positioning, certain podcasts, niche podcasts do very well. Like,
Mm.
like it's interesting. And I go, how smart is that person? They've done this very niche, I don't know, like, let's just say it's like, coffins of the world, right? Like, it's a
Yeah.
bit morbid,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
So there's got to be people like who, very particular people, maybe they're, funeral directors are going to be super
Yeah,
interested in coffins of the world, right? And it's
absolutely.
like that person who's created that podcast, they know their position, they know where they are, they
Mm.
want to be very specific. And actually, I try to do that with our content. I'm like going, you know what? We're not a business podcast. We're here to help people
Yep.
have a better day at work, right? Let's just always come back to that. What is a practical tip? What are real things that are happening? We're not here to be putting out highfalutin articles on,
Yep.
the state of investment banking. That's just not who we are, right? It's a
Yep.
very different, and it's taken us a while to really understand that position. And that's why I think
Mm.
it's an important one that you reference in the book a lot. But I also think, please, anyone listening, know that niche is also good. Niche is good.
Yes. Do you know, I only just came across the story and I don't know his name. It's not in front of me. But the founder of eBay, the
Yeah.
first thing that he ever, it was apparently on a Saturday night, he coded the whole site. And the first thing he ever listed was a broken laser pointer.
Wow.
It sold, and he went out of his way, because it was the first thing he's ever listed. He went out of his way to reach out to the guy who had bought it and said, "Look, do you realize it's broken? I did say it was broken, but I just wanted to let you know." And he said, "Yeah, I collect broken laser pointers."
Oh my
And
God.
so I just thought of that because it's a perfect example of there is something for everyone. And yes, when you consider that we are living on a planet with, how many is it now? 8 billion or so
Yeah,
people. Like, even niche is probably going to be quite large. And that's the
absolutely.
beauty of the global environment.
I love that. And then you finish with the promotion one.
And then the last P, which is really, I think, the hardest one to stomach for most people, because they don't like
Oh
that
my God, me
idea of
neither.
self promotion. But when you look at it again through the lens of, you look at the biggest brands in the world, the biggest brands in the world are the biggest advertisers in the world. Why is that? Because that defies logic. If they're the most known brands in the world, why are they still advertising and promoting to the same extent and even more? Because the brands know that they have to do that in order to remain relevant. They have to remain top of mind. They have to keep letting the clients know that they're there. So the same thing applies to us as individuals. We cannot assume, even though psychology tells us that we do assume people are looking at us, talking about us, thinking about us way more than they really are. That's the spotlight effect. They're actually not.
They're
So
not.
we have to be the ones to keep top of mind. We have to do what we have to do to put ourselves out there and let people know
It's
what
so
we're doing.
interesting you say that, because I've noticed over the last few years since doing the podcast, I might put out a LinkedIn post. It might have a video of me with a guest or whatever. My phone, I get a lot of WhatsApps in the day or so after that. Like, people will go, "Oh,
Yep.
I was just thinking about you. We should catch up for a coffee." And it does lead to things, right? And
Mm.
it's super interesting. It happens too frequently to be it to be just a coincidence. It happens
Yep.
all the time, or even on Instagram or something goes up, and I think you're then suddenly in someone's mind, because as you
Yes.
said, you're not always in people's mind, and they go, okay. Or I often get as well, "Oh, I've been meaning to say, I just saw your post, I've been meaning to send you a message to
Yep.
say, hey, do you want to work on this thing together?" So it does create a bit of the wheels start to turn when
Ah,
you put yourself out there and promote some things.
yeah, it's tapping into recency bias. You
Yeah.
know, we are just so overloaded
Yeah.
with information, with things that we have to do, things that we have to remember, and we're drowning in information.
Yeah.
So to think or assume that because you've put something out there, 3 weeks ago, to think that people are still remembering you or it is really crazy. So it does do that. It does keep you top of mind, and it will mean that at that moment of opportunity arising, you will be the first person that they think about. And that's so powerful when you think about that.
Totally.
That's
Totally.
where visibility is so powerful.
Totally. Now we're coming up to the end of our chat and just a few quick fire questions as well. But I wanted to ask you, do you think men and women think about personal brand differently? The reason I ask that, Carly, is that I find a lot of women in particular send us questions to the podcast about,
Hmm.
they've been bringing up their kids for a few years. They want to go back to work. And maybe it's this confidence gremlins come in and they're like, I don't know what to do. And, they're not very good at selling themselves. Whereas I find the men are a little bit better at selling themselves, or they haven't
Hmm.
had that break. Of course, some men do, but most
Yep.
don't. But I just
Yep.
wondered, I just thought as a final question on the book, etc., was there anything about a difference between men and women in this whole kind of personal branding space?
I can only speak from my experience in coaching clients because I do coach men and women. And I have to admit that I find it much easier to coach men with their personal branding because I will literally say to them, you need to do this, you need to reach out to this person, you need to start promoting this. When you go to that meeting, you need to say this. And they'll be like, yep, 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 okay. I will say the same thing to some of my female clients, and they'll be like, "Oh, I don't know." They'll really overthink it and they'll deliberate, and it will be a lot more thought that goes
Yeah.
into before taking action.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where that comes from, there is probably that, again, my experience with working with female executives versus male executives, women, and I don't know if there's research to back this up, you might be aware of it, but women are really great at being collaborative
Yes.
and
Yeah.
really great at being team players, and they're really great at being leaders as well. But even as a leader, they'll be the first one to say, oh, and the team did this, and they'll really recognize the team. So claiming their fame and really showcasing their achievements as an individual, I do find women struggle with that a little more than my male clients. And so I can only speak from my experience with my
Yeah.
clients,
Yeah.
but I feel like that gives me a little bit of a sense and a reality check of where we're at with that.
Yeah, I agree. I see similar. I think that I don't know. I think men don't think about it as much, or of course some men do. I know, like I've talked about.
Yes.
I'm a man and I've got my Maggie on my shoulder, right?
Yes.
But I think in general, my experience is, I've said this before on the podcast. If I, in my corporate career, if I had a role that was becoming available and it was like, okay, we've got an open role for an executive manager of this particular function,
Mm,
I found that the men were more likely to come to me and say, I can do that job. And I remember one
yeah.
particular lady, I won't mention her name, who I thought she should do the job. She was the best
Yeah.
person for the job. She never came near me. And when I had a one to one with her, I said, why haven't you put your hand up for that job? And she goes, oh no, I couldn't. That job is like so beyond me. Like I, blah, blah. And I was like, going, wait a second, hold up. You have
Hold up.
done this, you have done this, you've done
Yeah.
this. I mean, seriously. But and I remember there was two men and one woman, and the two men were like, "I can do that
I
job.
got
I've
it.
done this. I could, boom, boom, boom." And I was like, "Jesus Lord, she would buy and
She's
sell
the better
both of you.
candidate.
She's the better candidate. But it was interesting. And I mean, I've loads of examples like that. Loads of examples. Now,
Yeah.
not saying, I also had examples with women. I remember one particular woman who thought she could be running the whole show. And
Yeah.
honestly, she couldn't run
Yeah.
ahead,
Yeah.
couldn't
And I was I
go
was
on.
also about to say what shocked me most about this book is I did, when my book coach said to me, write the book with one person in mind
Yeah,
because that's going to help you just create a flow and that
yeah,
cohesion. So I wrote it for myself on, the version of me that was on extended maternity leave at that point in my life. She was who I wrote the book for. So naturally, I did assume that the book would just naturally resonate more with female readers. But I have been blown away by the amount of men that have been reaching out to me, telling
wow.
me that they loved the book. So there is also the element that we can't underestimate this, that I think women are naturally better at communicating their fears and insecurities.
That's true. Yeah, yeah,
And so maybe the men don't feel brave enough to talk about those fears and insecurities. So
yeah.
then we end up thinking it's only the women that are overthinking it and worrying, but actually they're just talking it out loud, whereas the guys don't necessarily do that as
I
well.
agree. I agree. I agree. Look, so wherever you are, a man, woman, whatever, this is a great book
Yeah.
for you guys, right?
Uh-huh.
It's fantastic, and it does. I think it's just so practical, right? It's really, really excellent. But love it, love it, love it. Now, here's our final three questions.
Okay.
Now, we're all about being better at work, Carly. What's the smallest possible change you think our listeners could do to have an impact and a better day at work tomorrow?
Walk into every room like you're meant to be in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love that. Walk into every room like you are meant to be there.
Yep. And
Set your
that,
intention.
yeah. And what will happen is your thoughts will follow your body. So your body will take the lead. When you walk into a room like you're meant to be there, you will naturally walk in at a purposeful pace. You'll have your head held high. You'll look more confident, and naturally your thoughts and feelings will also follow. And I think if you can just make a habit of doing that, you'll start to see people will react and respond to you differently, and that will lead to a better day at work, in my
Love
opinion.
that. Annette will love that. And by the way, Annette said to say hello because I was talking to her yesterday. Annette
Tell her I said
loves
hello.
you, Carly, and all of your content. So yeah, so I forgot to say that earlier on, but she does. She said, I'm dying to hear what she says in this conversation. Can you share with our listeners something you learned or experienced at work that unexpectedly made your whole life better? We've had lots of different answers to this over the years.
Mm, that is a really tricky and yet interesting, beautiful question that I.
Something you learned or experienced at work. Well, I mean, I was thinking about you going, because I often think, I always say to, I wonder what they'll say.
Yeah.
And you said in the book something about this man who was really your backer, and you went and met with him. I think you put yourself forward for a job that was
Mm,
like you it was back in the days where you'd send in the letter, and
yes.
I thought, when I read that in the book, I thought, wow, she had the courage to be very early on in her life when she didn't really have any experience, or and then you met this guy who was
Yeah.
like, you need to go and do this course, do this, then come back to me. And I thought, Jesus, she's learned very early on in her career to be who she wants to be,
Mm.
and opened door, and you met people by just putting yourself out there. So that was what I thought. I wonder, is that what she learned? But now I'm putting words in your mouth, and it was
Oh no,
just
but I love that you're putting words in my mouth because you actually have helped me access the thought. So my really one of my first ever PR clients, when I first pitched to him to be his publicist, he said, "Look, Australia is such a small part of our business. I'm not looking for a publicist, so basically no." And I decided that wasn't going to work for me. And I actually ended up just going out there and doing his PR for him anyway.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if that is considered unethical or even potentially misrepresenting myself, but I was very young at the time, so I didn't have that level of awareness perhaps. But I went out and I got him PR opportunities, I set up event opportunities. I did this for months, to the point where when I sat down with him again, because he was an international speaker, so he would, come periodically. And when I sat down with him again, maybe 6 months later, he couldn't say no to me,
Wow.
because I had demonstrated that I was going to do anything, whether he liked it or not, because I was such a big believer in his work. So, what I would say to that in terms of how that would apply to anyone listening, no, don't go out and just start doing someone's PR, but go out and add value to the people that you do want to connect with. And even if those people are out of your sphere of influence, so it might be someone, quite a few levels above you that you want to capture their attention, the best way to make an impression is to add massive value, so much so that they can't ignore you.
I love that, Carly. That's great advice for even like younger listeners, etc.
Mm,
Like you can do a lot to, I suppose, get yourself out there and do it in a way that's helpful. Like you were helping him.
yeah,
I find even simple things like, you know, when we have guests on the show, I'll go, oh, they're very passionate about Gen Z.
yeah,
Like there was one particular guest on, Sinead, and if I find an article on, if something comes into me, like a newsletter or something on Gen Z, I just forward it to her.
yeah,
And she's always writes back to me saying, "Oh my God, Carl, thank you so much for thinking of that." And then she'll send me something else. And you go, "Oh
yeah,
wow." And it's not like, it's just sometimes, to your point, it's like, it's just putting yourself out there, helping people where you feel, or not even just helping, it's like sharing
yeah.
something that can help people. I think that's a great lesson for any of our listeners.
Yeah, it's really is. It comes down to just adding value to people. And,
Yeah.
certainly for people who are just starting out, perhaps they don't necessarily, for example, have a network where they can connect
Yes.
people. It's more, it might just be that giving them information,
Yeah.
doing some research for them, just those things really stand out.
Oh
That's
my,
going over
I
and
agree.
above.
I agree. And we finish all of our chats with this question. Can you recall the best advice you've ever received that you think has made you better at work?
The best advice I've ever received that's made me better at
Better at
work. So,
work,
this
yeah.
is definitely going to be something that my mentor has said to me. And it is always be impeccable with your words. And that's
Oh,
not, he wasn't necessarily talking about being impeccable with my words with other people. So, how I was interacting with other people, he was talking about being impeccable with the words that I was using for myself, how I was
ah,
describing myself, how I was even contemplating or reflecting on my own skills or my own downsides, because he's such a big believer that what you say to yourself, you'll make true. So when you're impeccable with your words, you're thinking about what you're thinking about and what words you're using as you go along. So that
I
to me
love
has
that.
made me better at work, because instead of sitting back and criticizing myself or putting myself down in any way, I always think of his advice, because I know that those words and those ideas will have a really negative ripple effect, and it's not worth it.
I love that. And it's actually
Mm.
interesting because I think if you're negative about yourself, say you're a leader and you're negative about yourself, people don't then have confidence in you or trust in
Yeah.
you. So I think it's such great advice that he gave you because it can have ripple effects because the team go, oh my God, what's going on? And you can see it yourself, even with politicians. If people go,
Yep.
they don't have the trust anymore, or even big companies, like if the CEO has made it, done some things, or has criticized, maybe has said something like, I'm not very good at this, like suddenly share prices go down. So it's very,
Yeah.
it's a really
It's
good
real.
advice. It's real.
It's
It's real.
real.
Listen, thank you so
Oh,
much
thank
for
you so
coming
much.
on the show. Courage to Be. It's an essential book for anyone that's kind of ready to put themselves out there, build their influence, and attract the right opportunities, while I suppose still being their best selves in the mind, body, and what did you say, brand, right?
Brand, exactly. Thank you so much. And congratulations again on all that you've done with the show. See what happens when people put themselves out there. If the world didn't have Better at Work, where would we all be?
Oh God, you're too kind. You're too kind. No, and thank you
It's
for
true.
all your help with getting me to put this out here, because I think
No.
without you, I know I would say without you, it definitely wouldn't have started, because it was super helpful when more than helpful. It was inspiring and enlightening when I spent my time with you those 5 or 6 years ago to really get myself thinking about what did I want to put out there. So thank you so much as
But
well,
now you're
Carly.
on the hook. Now you're on the hook. Everyone that's listened to this episode is going to be waiting to see you on TV
Oh
and waiting
God.
to see you really put yourself out there more and have more individual shows.
Wait, now
So I'm
Maggie's
sorry.
back. Maggie's back. Wait, now she's back. Get out. She's
Nice
back.
to
She's
meet you,
back.
Maggie.
Hi, Maggie. Hi, Maggie. Now, listen, if you want more information on the lovely Carly, go to Carlii Lyon. That's CarlILYON.com.au. Remember, she's in Australia, so she's got the .au at the end. I had to change my website because I was told, hey, you can't have .au because you're UK, you're global now. Get rid of the AU. I was
I
told that.
know. I have both. I have .com and .com.au.
Oh, so our listeners can get you at
I'm everywhere.
carliline.com. Okay, you're everywhere. You see, she's already all over it. There you'll
I'm all
find
over it.
there you'll find loads of details on her lovely book, Courage to Be, and her coaching programs, and so much more. Thank you, Carly, for joining
Thank you
us.
so much.
Lovely to see you again, and I'll talk to you very soon.